After more than 2 decades in law enforcement, I'd earned a break. Between the long nights, endless paperwork, and the constant emotional toll of dealing with the city's worst, I needed a place where I could breathe. That's why I bought the cabin. Tucked into a quiet corner of Pinewood Lake, it was everything I wanted: secluded, cozy, and right on the water. It was about a 15-minute drive from the edge of a high-end HOA neighborhood, but crucially, it was outside there. Jurisdiction. That was part of the appeal. No rules, no board meetings, no nosy neighbors. Just me, my fishing gear, and the occasional bald eagle overhead. I bought the place in late spring, just before Memorial Day weekend. The weather was perfect. The trees were full and green, the lake water sparkled like something out of a postcard, and the air smelled like pine and fresh soil. I brought up a few essentials: camp chairs, a grill, some food, and a good bottle of bourbon, and planned to spend the long weekend doing nothing at all. I didn't even turn on my phone for the first day. It was my little slice of paradise. The first 2 days were exactly what I'd hoped for. I fished off the dock, caught a couple of decent-sized bass, grilled them over a fire pit I built with stones from the property, and slept with the windows open so I could hear the crickets and the soft lapping of the water. It was the kind of peaceful you can't buy in the city. I finally felt like I could exhale, but on the third day, things took a turn. I had just finished stacking some firewood along the side of the cabin when I noticed a woman standing at the edge of my driveway. She was tall, maybe mid-50s, with frosted blonde hair, oversized sunglasses, and the kind of perfectly ironed khakis that screamed HOA board member. She held a clipboard like a weapon. I was still in my old sweatpants and a t-shirt, probably looking half feral after 2 days of nature therapy. So I wiped my hands on my pants and walked over to see what she wanted. "Hi there," she called out, in that overly cheerful tone people use when they're about to be condescending. "I'm Karen. I'm the chairperson of the Pinewood Lakes, HOA. Just wanted to come over and welcome you to the neighborhood." I smiled politely. "Thanks, but I'm not actually part of the neighborhood. My property isn't under the HOA." She blinked like she hadn't heard me. "Well, we consider this area part of the greater Pinewood Lakes community, so we like to make sure everyone's aware of the expectations." "Again," I said, more firmly this time, "this property is not within HOA boundaries. I confirmed that with the county before I closed the sale." Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes sharpened. "We still like to keep things uniform. It's best for property values. I've brought a welcome packet with our guidelines." I didn't take it. "I appreciate the visit," I said, "but I'm good. I won't be attending any meetings. And I won't be paying any dues." Her jaw twitched. "Well, we'll see about that." And just like that, she spun on her heel and marched back up the gravel path toward her shiny SUV, parked along the shoulder like it owned the place. I stood there, dumbfounded. It was like watching a sitcom character come to life. I thought, maybe that was the end of it, just a bored suburban woman trying to flex authority where she had none. I went back to chopping firewood, figuring she'd find another hobby soon enough. I couldn't have known that her visit was just the beginning, and that her entitled streak would run deeper and more ridiculous than I could have ever imagined. The weekend after my unexpected encounter with Karen, I returned to the cabin determined to enjoy the peace I had originally sought. I brought my dog, Duke, a lumbering old shepherd who loved the outdoors almost as much as I did. We spent Friday evening on the dock, watching the sun dip beneath the trees while frogs croaked in the background. I had nearly convinced myself that Karen was just a one-time nuisance, a bored neighbor looking for control where none was needed. But that illusion didn't last long. Saturday morning, I was brewing coffee on the deck when I heard the unmistakable crunch of tires on gravel. A white Lexus slowly pulled up to the edge of my property. I sighed before even looking up. There she was, Karen, again, this time wearing a wide sun hat and carrying the same clipboard as before. I half wondered if she slept with it. Before I could even greet her, she spoke. "Just following up on our conversation last weekend," she said sweetly, though her tone had that sour undertone of someone barely masking irritation. "I checked with the HOA maps, and while your property technically isn't within our boundaries, it's close enough that we'd like to treat it as a contributing property." I raised an eyebrow. "Contributing to what?" "I don't use your roads. I don't use your clubhouse. I don't even have a mailbox in your jurisdiction." Karen's smile stretched thinner. "Well, that's not really the point. It's about cohesion, harmony. We all have to play our part to keep the community looking nice. Wouldn't want this place to stand out for the wrong reasons." I glanced around. My cabin was clean, modest, and well kept. No neon lights, no junk in the yard. If anything, it blended perfectly with the forest. She just wanted control, plain and simple. "I'm not joining the HOA," I said flatly. "This land is privately owned, legally outside your reach. You have no say here." That should have ended it, but Karen wasn't the kind to take no for an answer. She huffed, gave Duke a disdainful glance as he barked from the porch, and stomped back to her SUV. I figured that would be the last of it for a while. I was wrong again. The very next day, a new visitor showed up. This time it was a teenager, tall and lanky, with dyed blonde hair and sunglasses too big for his face. He walked onto my property like he was casing the place, filming himself on his phone and narrating something about sick lake house vibes. I stepped out from the cabin. "Can I help you?" I asked, voice firm. He looked up, annoyed that I'd interrupted whatever video he was making. "Yo, I'm Cody. My mom said I could use this place for my grad party next month." "Pretty chill setup you've got." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "This is the lake cabin, right?" he asked, looking confused. "Mom said it was just a formality. Like, it belongs to the neighborhood, technically. She already told my friends." My stomach dropped a little, not out of fear, but in disbelief. "This is my private property. No one has permission to host anything here but me." He scoffed. "You don't get it. My mom runs this whole area. People do what she says. She said we could have the party here. It's just one night." "Let me make something perfectly clear," I said, stepping forward. "I don't care what your mom said. This is my land, my cabin, and no one is throwing a party here but me. If you step on this property again without my permission, you'll be trespassing." Cody raised his phone like he was going to argue, but one look at Duke, who was now growling softly from the steps, made him rethink it. He muttered something about psycho old dudes and stormed off down the driveway. I watched him go, trying to contain my frustration. This wasn't just a bratty kid and an overzealous mom. This was entitlement on a whole different level, and it was only just getting started. The following weekend, I arrived at the cabin earlier than usual. Something about the way Cody had strutted onto my property the week before left a sour taste in my mouth. I dealt with entitled teenagers before, both in uniform and out, but this was different. The audacity wasn't just in his tone, it was in his certainty. He truly believed his mother's influence gave him access to a place that didn't belong to him. And knowing Karen, she'd probably filled his head with lies about the HO's reach and power. I wasn't about to let it slide. I made a point to install a few motion-sensitive cameras around the cabin, nothing fancy, just enough to alert me if someone crossed the tree line. I wasn't paranoid, but I was prepared. That's something law enforcement teaches you over time. Hope for peace, but never assume it. With that done, I settled in for what I hoped would be a calm, uneventful weekend. But the calm didn't last. Saturday afternoon, I was out back cleaning the kayak when I heard the unmistakable sound of car doors slamming. I stepped around the side of the cabin and saw the same white Lexus from before parked at the edge of my gravel drive. Karen stood next to it, arms crossed, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. Next to her, Cody leaned against the car with that same smug expression on his face. And behind them, a Jeep Wrangler loaded with teenagers, coolers, and folding chairs. I approached slowly, jaw clenched. Karen spoke first. "We're here to do a quick walk-through for the party. It's going to be very tasteful, just a few dozen of Cody's closest friends. I've already talked to the decorator and the DJ about setup." My silence must have caught her off guard. "Excuse me?" I finally said. "Oh, don't be difficult," she snapped. "This isn't a big deal. You don't even live here full time. It's just one night, and frankly, it would look very bad if you got in the way of your community's celebration." I stared at her, stunned. "Let me say this one more time, because clearly, you didn't hear me the last 3 times. This property is not part of your HOA. You have no authority here. And no one is throwing a party on my land without my permission." Cody rolled his eyes. "God, why are you being such a hard-ass? My mom said it's basically community space. You don't even use it." Karen put a hand on his arm as if to calm him, but she didn't bother hiding her contempt. "You're being unreasonable," she said. "We're offering to clean up afterward. We'll even throw in a little rental fee if that's what this is about." "This isn't about money," I replied, my voice firm but steady. "This is about respect, and the complete lack of it that you and your son have shown since the moment we met." Karen's lips pursed. "Do you know who I am?" "Yeah," I said. "You're someone who's about 10 seconds from being charged with trespassing." The silence that followed was thick. Cody muttered something under his breath, but Karen tugged his arm and marched him back toward the car. As she opened the door, she turned back to me with narrowed eyes. "You'll regret this," she said. "We always get what we want in this neighborhood." I didn't respond. I just stood there, watching them pull away, the Jeep following behind, like a caravan of clueless entitlement. I knew right then that this wouldn't be the last time they'd tried to cross a line. But they clearly didn't know who they were dealing with, not just some weekend cabin owner, not just a grumpy neighbor. They were picking a fight with the chief of police. And they were about to learn what a bad idea that was. The next few days passed quietly, but I knew better than to believe the issue was over. People like Karen didn't give up. They regrouped, plotted, and came back louder. Sure enough, by the following weekend, I had 3 missed calls from an unknown number and a voicemail that left me shaking my head. It was Karen, her voice sickeningly sweet but laced with veiled threats. "I'd really prefer not to involve legal matters," she had said. "But if you keep obstructing community events, I'll have no choice but to escalate this to the HOA board and, if necessary, county zoning. Just think it over." Think it over? She still thought she could intimidate me. She didn't know that I dealt with worse than her on my worst day. If she wanted escalation, I was ready for it. That Friday evening, I decided to stay overnight at the cabin instead of driving back to the city. I wanted to be present. I also had a sneaking suspicion Karen and her entitled son were planning something they hadn't told me about. So I double-checked the locks, ensured the surveillance cameras were running, and took a flashlight with me for a walk around the property line. Around 9 p.m., a car drove past slowly. Too slow to be casual. I stayed out of sight, crouching in the shadows by the tree line. It was a group of teenagers, 3 cars in a row. They didn't stop, but they scoped out the area. It didn't take a genius to figure out what they were doing. Mapping out entrances, planning a sneak in. It was the same kind of behavior I'd seen countless times in my years on the job, except this time they were dumb enough to try it on a police officer's land. The next morning, I got confirmation. A neighbor from a few properties down, a retired Navy vet named Tom, stopped by. He'd heard rumors through his wife, who was plugged into the local HOA gossip network. Karen's been telling folks her son is having a private graduation party at a lakeside venue. Tom told me. She didn't say where, but I figured. It might be your place. She thinks you'll just back down. I nodded, grateful for the heads up. Not a chance. Thanks for letting me know. By Saturday afternoon, I was ready. I called in a couple of off-duty officers friends of mine, just to make sure I wasn't the only one around if things got out of hand. They parked discreetly in the trees near the edge of my property. I remained visible, sitting on my porch. In uniform, sipping coffee as the sun began to set. Sure enough, around 6 p.m., the first wave of cars arrived. Teenagers spilled out, dressed for a lakeside rigor, carrying coolers and portable speakers. They hesitated when they saw me. Some stopped altogether and turned back to their cars. Others started calling someone, probably Cody. And then, right on cue, Karen's white Lexus appeared, followed by another SUV loaded with more party-goers. She stepped out, looking furious the moment her eyes landed on me in full uniform. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, storming toward the porch. "Protecting my property," I said calmly. "As I warned you." "You can't." "Seriously, B, this is ridiculous. You're threatening kids." "I'm enforcing the law," I corrected. "This is private property. I've already spoken to the sheriff's department. If anyone trespasses here again, I have every right to press charges. That includes you and your son." Karen sputtered, her face turning bright red. "This is abuse of power." "No," I said, standing now. "It's the use of power lawfully. You push too far. Now you face the consequences." She glanced around and noticed the other officers stepping out from the trees, radios clipped to their belts. That's when it hit her. This wasn't some bluff. This was real. She turned, grabbed Cody by the wrist as he stepped out of another car, and hissed something to him before they both retreated without another word. The rest of the teens scattered. Just like that, the party was over before it began. The sun was still sinking low behind the lake when the last car pulled away. A few cans and cups had already been dropped near the edge of the driveway, remnants of a party that never had a chance to begin. I picked one up and shook my head. These kids had no idea how close they came to real trouble. But the real story wasn't the teenagers, it was Karen and her son, who had treated my private property like it was some community playground. After they left, I stayed on the porch with the other two off-duty officers for a while. We swapped stories and laughed about how fast the kids had turned tail once they saw law enforcement. One of them, Officer Mason, chuckled and said, "That woman's got some nerve. You sure you don't want to press charges?" I'd love to slap some citations down. Tempting, I replied. But let's give them one last chance to walk away from this quietly. Maybe embarrassment will be punishment enough. But I wasn't done just yet. I took down the plate numbers from the vehicles that had pulled in, just in case. I also made a point to file a detailed report and sent it directly to the sheriff's office, not because I was looking to throw my weight around, but because I wanted everything documented. Karen had gone too far, and if she tried to flip the narrative, I needed the paper trail. The next day, I returned to the city and headed into the station. Even though it was technically my day off, I wanted to speak with a couple of people in the legal department to confirm the next steps. Sure enough, trespassing charges were fully valid. Even the act of organizing an event on private land without consent could be cited. We had surveillance footage, audio recordings from my porch cam, and my own first-hand witness account. If Karen or Cody tried anything again, I was well within my rights to act. I didn't have to wait long. That Monday evening, I got a visit. At the station, unexpected, but not surprising. Karen herself waltzed through the front doors with a freshly printed complaint in hand. She wore a smug look on her face as she walked up to the reception desk and asked to speak with someone in charge. The officer at the desk looked over and spotted me in the bullpen, then gestured toward my office. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Karen, what a surprise. Her expression faltered for a second. You work here? I don't just work here, I said. I run this place. Chief Taylor, at your service. For a few seconds, she just stood there, blinking like her brain was trying to reboot. I'd like to file a formal complaint. You intimidated my son. You threatened my family. You? I cut her off. I did my job. And now you're in my house, making baseless accusations. I suggest you walk very carefully right now, Karen. She looked around, suddenly aware that several officers were watching us with interest. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. This isn't over. Oh, I think it is, I said calmly. You've trespassed. You've attempted to coerce me. You've tried to throw unauthorized parties on private land. I've got it all documented. Now you can either walk away or we can escalate this further. Up to you. She stared at me, jaw clenched, then turned on her heel and stormed out without another word. After she left, I filed one more report and forwarded a copy to the HOA board, not that they had jurisdiction over me, but I knew they'd appreciate. Knowing what kind of PR disaster Karen had almost dropped in their lap, I didn't hear from her again for weeks after that. And as for Cody, he never set foot near the lake again. It's been a few months since the incident with Karen and her son, and the lake has finally returned to the quiet sanctuary I intended it to be. The birds chirp in the morning, the water laps gently against the shore, and the only visitor I get now is the occasional deer wandering through the woods behind the cabin. The drama that unfolded feels like a strange fever dream, but every time I think back to it, I remember how close it came to spiraling completely out of control, all because one entitled woman believed her influence extended beyond her boundaries. After our last encounter at the police station, Karen seemed to vanish from my world entirely. No more unexpected drop-ins. No more late-night drive-bys. No more arrogant teenagers walking around my property like it was some community park. I didn't hear another word from Cody either, and as far as I could tell, the so-called graduation party was never rescheduled. Maybe they found another venue, or maybe Karen finally realized that not everyone could be manipulated. Word traveled fast through the local community, especially among the HOA members. One of the officers I worked with mentioned overhearing Karen's name at a neighborhood watch meeting in town. Apparently, some members of the HOA were less than thrilled with how she handled things. A few were embarrassed that she dragged their association into a confrontation with the chief of police over what amounted to her son's unauthorized party plans. Whether she stepped down from her position or was gently pushed out, I never found out. But the next time I drove past the Pinewood Lakes entrance sign, her name had been removed from the list of board members. Poetic justice. I kept the surveillance cameras up, of course. Not out of paranoia, but for peace of mind. I also put up a new sign at the edge of my property. Private land, no trespassing. Protected by cameras and the law. Subtle, but clear enough for anyone who thought the woods were an extension of their backyard. Despite everything, I didn't press formal charges. I could have, and part of me wanted to. But in the end, Karen humiliated herself more thoroughly than any legal punishment could have done. Facing the public embarrassment of being confronted by a police chief she tried to push around along with being quietly ousted by her own HOA was probably more painful for someone like her than a court summons ever would have been. Few of my neighbors, those who lived nearby but outside the HOA's control, started warming up to me after That? One of them, an older man named Glenn, stopped by with a six-pack and thanked me. He said the HOA had been slowly creeping their influence across property lines for years, but no one had stood up to them quite like I did. Word had gotten around. You drew a line in the sand, Glenn said, and made damn sure they knew not to cross it. I just smiled and offered him a seat on the porch. It was never about flexing power. It was about defending what was mine. I didn't work for 30 years, sacrificing time, energy, and sometimes safety, just to have some suburban tyrant dictate what I could do on my own land. This cabin was my reward, my retreat, my space. And now, finally, it felt like it again. Lake glistens in the morning light. The air smells like pine and clean water. And best of all, the silence isn't filled with Karen's voice echoing across the property line. Just the sounds of nature and the deep satisfaction that comes with standing your ground.